Dr. Rania Masri is an Arab-American writer, human rights activist. She's an assistant professor at the University of Balamand in Lebanon. Her research and activism has centered on environmental justice, civil rights, anti-war for Iraq, and anti-occupation Palestine, and anti-apartheid Israel. She has also told me that she is going to accept a position at the American University of Beirut when she returns to Lebanon in several weeks. Ms. Rania, happy to have you here.
Thank you. It's good to be among friends and family. Though every time I come back to North Carolina, I wish I were talking about something else, like trees. You know, we say the word peace and we continue to say the word peace. And I have to say, for me as an Arab, for me as somebody who considers myself emotionally, politically, spiritually, ideologically Palestinian, the word peace has gotten to be quite offensive. Truly quite offensive. I'll say I don't want peace. I completely don't want peace, because peace is translated for my community as being we die silently. And we don't want to die silently. We actually have a very strange request. We want to live. And we want to live with full human rights. Full human rights. We do not want anyone to compromise on our human rights. And this sounds revolutionary. It sounds radical. And it shouldn't be. And when I say we want our full human rights, that's truly what it means. So when we look at what is actually happening in Gaza, what's happening in the West Bank, what's happening elsewhere, it's essential to realize that everything that has been happening to Gaza is simply exemplary of Zionism. It is not an exception. It's not that what is happening against the Palestinians in Gaza has not happened in the West Bank, or has not happened in Jerusalem, or has not happened in Jaffa and Haifa and Lid and other parts of our land. It is simply exemplary in Gaza. 80% of the Palestinians in Gaza are not from Gaza. That's why I reject referring to them as Gazans. They are Palestinians. 80% of them come from villages in 1948. They are refugees. When we look at what Zionism has been demanding of Palestinians in Gaza, very clear, and the cries for this over the past few years, and especially over the past few months, have reached historic levels in Israel. They're openly calling for ethnic cleansing, using that language of ethnic cleansing, openly calling for genocide. There was an article that was published twice in the Times of Israel entitled, "Genocide is Permissible." Now, for a community to openly be calling for such things means that it has gone beyond even the shame of justifying murder and truly an acceptance of justifying murder. And for them to do this means that they have truly embraced racism. We have become in their eyes exactly what Menachem Begin said that we were, which is cockroaches, monsters on two legs. This is how much they have dehumanized Palestinians. And I also object to another narrative that is presented in the US media, which is this focus on the death of Palestinian children. And yes, our children have been killed. More than 430 of our children have been killed in the past 29 days. And it's true, children are innocent, but so are our women. And they focus on our women, and they separate our women from our men, and I refuse that separation of our women from our men, not just as a feminist, but also because it implies that killing our men is acceptable. And it's not acceptable. And then they present that 85% of the 1,900 Palestinians that have been killed thus far in Gaza are civilians. True. But that doesn't mean the remaining 15%, is my math correct? The remaining 15% is acceptable. Because the remaining 15%, and I have to say this openly and clearly, are the bravest, most courageous of our men. And I support them and I salute them. And their death is a murder. If we recognize that Palestinians require the full human rights that every other community demands, then we recognize that it is their right to defend themselves. Not only to defend themselves against Israeli bombs and F-16s and missiles from land, air, and sea. Not only that, but it becomes secondary, in my opinion, to talk about who launched what first. Did the rockets come from Gaza before or after the Israeli bombardment? Because even if the Palestinian resistance launched the first rocket, which they did not, but even if they did, it would not legally be a provocation. It would legally be a retaliation. We need to recognize that. It would be a retaliation because an occupied population has the right to use any means necessary according to international law to defend itself. So that includes launching rockets. So I will not apologize for those rockets. I will not apologize for the tunnels. I stand here and I say, I am proud of our men that have fought, just like I am proud of our men in Lebanon that fought and beat the Israeli military in 2006. That is the context that I'm presenting this in. And that is the context that we need to strive for. And that is the context that the Palestinian resistance in Gaza have shown us. Because even though one of the objectives of the Israeli military was to break the Palestinian resistance, they failed in doing so, just as they failed to break the Lebanese resistance in 2006. They have excelled in doing what they know how to do since 1948. They know how to kill, they know how to destroy, but they have failed in breaking the spirit of the Palestinians. They have failed in doing that. And I say that not out of ideology and spirituality and rhetoric. I say that because when you look at the demand that has come out of Palestinians in Gaza, it has not been a white flag. It has not been, please stop killing us. It has been a ceasefire only with the ending of the siege. They did not say stop the bombs. They said treat us with dignity and end the siege, because the only difference between the siege and the bomb is the rate and intensity of the murder. All of us who were active in the 90s against the sanctions on Iraq recognize that the sanctions on Iraq killed more children than the American bombs on Iraq. They killed 5,000 children every month, and we oppose that. It is with that same vehemence that we need to oppose this siege on Gaza. And we need to recognize that the siege on Gaza did not begin in 2005, nor in 2006. Gaza became fenced off, literally fenced off, in 1993. 1993. What happened in 1993, if anyone remembers? Oslo. The wall around Gaza was built before the apartheid wall in the West Bank. Before. Everything that we see happening to the Palestinians in Gaza has been happening to Palestinians in the West Bank and Palestinian citizens of Israel at the same time. They have also had their water cut off. They have also had their electricity cut off. They have also been denied freedom of movement. They have also been denied civil rights. They have also had institutionalized racism imposed against them, dehumanization, and calls from the Israeli public for a transfer of Palestinian citizens of Israel. Same language, same dehumanization. The hate that the Israelis have spewed against the Palestinians in Gaza, they have used the same language against Palestinian citizens in Israel and against the Palestinians in the West Bank. And I say the Israelis, and I'm not generalizing. I wish I were generalizing and I could be accused of conducting stereotypes. 95% of the Israelis supported the offensive against the Gaza population. 95%. When we speak of a peace movement in Israel, I have to say, where is it? It's so small. It's the equivalent of the leftist socialist movement in the United States. I say this as a leftist socialist in the United States. We have to recognize also that we don't have a so-called truce right now. We have a 72-hour ceasefire. And what is being demanded of Hamas by, and I'm very ashamed to say, not just the Israeli government, but by the Egyptian government, by the Saudi government, by the Emirati government, we have traitors in the Arab world. Supported by the US government, and unfortunately supported by Mahmoud Abbas, who, for God's sakes, we should stop calling the president because his term expired years ago. Okay. All of these individuals are calling for the disarming of Hamas as a condition to lifting the siege. And Netanyahu has gone forward so far as to say he will only let in building material if Hamas disarms. So if the Palestinian resistance denies their own right for defense and protection, then they will get some material to allow them to rebuild their homes, schools, hospitals, and infrastructure. This is not a condition. This is actually a violation of the Geneva Convention. So it brings us to a critical question. What are we going to do about it? And how are we going to do what needs to be done? And I think what's critical here is for us to know what it is that we're demanding and then know how to get there. And we really, really need to demand the full human rights of the Palestinians, which means if the tables were turned, if we were actually the terrorist, and I'm using that word again legally, if we were actually the terrorists and we had destroyed the infrastructure in Israel and killed 1% of their population in 29 days, which is how many of us they have killed in Gaza, okay, 1%, okay? what would have been the cry from the so-called international community? There'd be an uproar. Yeah, but somehow killing people of color is way cool, it's acceptable. We are demanding an arms embargo on the state of Israel. They are calling for disarming Hamas. I'm like, hell no, we first disarm the criminals. You don't disarm the defenders. So we're asking for an arms embargo on the state of Israel. And this may be asking too much, you say. No, I think this is the time. Because guess what happened in 24 hours? In 24 hours, we had the UK and Spain go, I don't feel comfortable selling weapons to the Israelis anymore. Spain has now looked upon all the weapons transfers to Israel. Now, Spain gives less than 1% to the Israeli military, but nevertheless, it's a very important political position. So asking for an arms embargo is not asking for the impossible, it's asking for the reasonable. We're also asking for sanctions to be placed on the state of Israel. Sanctions. They have committed crimes. They should pay. And again, is this asking too much? Well, earlier last week, the foreign minister from Finland said that sanctions against Israel must be on the table. It must be an option. Now, he said that during the bombardment, but it still should be an option because if you kill 1,900 people, you should pay. You should pay. We're asking for criminals to be tried. That means we're asking for the International Criminal Court and we're asking for the International Court of Justice. This is how we hold Israel accountable. This is how we protect the Palestinians from this happening in another 2 years. This is the fourth assault against Palestinians in Gaza in 9 years. The fourth. And each time it has gotten more intensive, each time it has gotten more barbaric, and each time the siege has been tightened on Gaza. So we're asking for the International Criminal Court, the arms embargo, and the sanctions. And by the way, when I say arms embargo, Amnesty International is asking for the same thing. Amnesty International is not that leftist, most radical and revolutionary of organizations. Again, these demands are getting to be more mainstream. We need to make them more mainstream. We also need to be meeting and protesting and getting as angry about the siege as we are angry about the weapons and the bombardment. We need to be as angry. That means the organization and the energy that you brought today, you need to magnify it to end the criminal siege on Gaza. And I say criminal because it has been defined by independent jurists who are part of the United Nations as criminal, as illegal. We need it to be removed unconditionally by land, air, and sea. That means the airport in Gaza needs to be rebuilt. I'm not going to depend on the Egyptians to get stuff into Gaza. I'm not going to depend on the Israelis to get stuff into Gaza. You know how many truckloads of food the Egyptians let past in 29 days? Truckloads. Truckloads. 4. We need to end the impunity that is afforded to the state of Israel. The impunity, I'll give you some examples here. The Palestinian Center for Human Rights opened 477 cases of criminal behavior. Most of them were tossed out. And Israel decided to give a 7-month prison sentence to one soldier who stole a credit card. And it decided to give a suspended sentence to soldiers who used children as human shields, and a suspended sentence to an individual for the misuse of a firearm that killed a woman. So theft of a credit card by the Israeli government is viewed as more damaging than the killing and the injuring of Palestinian souls. We need to reaffirm something very critically in our language. We are not Gazans. We are not West Bankers. We are Palestinians. That means Gaza is part of Palestine. That means everything that the Israelis are doing in Gaza, they are doing elsewhere. We need to affirm it in our language. And when we affirm it in our language, we clarify what we want. That means we are not only asking for an end of the criminal siege, we're asking for an end of the occupation in totality, an end of all the occupation, which includes Jerusalem, because Jerusalem is under occupation. We're also asking for an end of apartheid. And I use that word again, not out of vehemence, like we use a lot of words, but legally, there is something called a crime of apartheid. And I want to tell you exactly how we define the crime of apartheid. It is defined as having policies that, quote, have the purpose of establishing and maintaining domination by one racial group or persons over any other racial group of or persons, and systematically oppressing them, in particular by means such as segregation, expropriation of land, denial of the right to leave, denial of the right to return to your country, denial of the right to a nationality, and denial of the right to freedom of movement, and denial of the right of a residence. This is verbatim what the Israeli government does. So it's not an issue of, is it like South Africa, is it not like South Africa? It's actually not like South Africa. It is worse than apartheid South Africa. So we use that word legally. And again, I'm not the one saying it's worse than apartheid South Africa. Archbishop Desmond Tutu was the one who said, when he visited, that what he is witnessing in the land of Palestine is worse than political apartheid in South Africa. So there is a crime of apartheid, and we are asking for it to be ended throughout the land of Palestine, which is inclusive of the state of Israel. So when people ask me, do I support Israel's right to exist? I don't even know what that means. Do I support a state's right to exist? No. So long as Israel exists under a form of apartheid, no, I do not support its right to exist. Absolutely, and I will not be ashamed to say it. Does that mean I want Israeli Jews to be thrown into the sea? No. It does mean that I want human rights to be applied equally and unconditionally to all the people, which means we have a right to return to our villages. And the only reason that is given to deny Palestinians their right of return is because we either believe in Jesus Christ or the Prophet Muhammad. That's it. And when you put it in that language, how can it be looked upon in any other way other than discrimination? And the reasons, and we go back, why did the Israelis commit these crimes against Palestinians in Gaza? Why have the Israelis committed these crimes against Palestinians in the West Bank and Jerusalem and Haifa and Yafa and all of our other villages? It's for one simple reason, according to their language. When you get to have the arrogance of a fascist state, you get to speak very clearly and honestly. And the Israelis are speaking wonderfully honestly. And they are facing something called a demographic threat. What does that mean, a demographic threat? It means that your mere existence is a threat to them. And if your mere existence is a threat to them, they have only one option: to kill you. So the mere fact that Palestinians exist means in their eyes that Palestinians resist. There is no separation in the logic of a Zionist between existence and resistance, because the mere fact that we exist means we resist. So we take it back to its very core, and I have to speak this bluntly. The core of it is Israel has to make a choice. It can either continue to live as a Jewish state, or it can live democratically. It can either continue to live as a Jewish state, or it can live peacefully. One cannot have a system of policy that is in itself an imposition of discrimination and claim to be democratic. It simply does not work. It doesn't make a difference if it's a Jewish, Christian, Buddhist, Muslim, atheist state. It doesn't make a difference. I'm not being anti-Semitic here. It's simply an issue of logic. You cannot have a nation based on any religion and claim to be democratic. One. Two, you cannot have a nation based on any religion and claim to be peaceful, because then your raison d'etre, your whole construct is getting rid of the other by any means possible, be it economic destruction, which is a crime, be it expulsion, which is a crime, or be it killing and justifying our murder because we resist. So we have to recognize that is the core. That is the language that we need to use. And we must not mince our words, because mincing our words and apologizing for our words implies that we are saying that Palestinians do not deserve all their human rights. We have been told to compromise for way too long. Noam Chomsky says our right of return is asking too much. And that's the same language that was used against African Americans. It's the same language that's been used against people of color in this country, be it Latin Americans, be it others. Don't ask so much. Isn't enough? We're no longer slaves. No, by God, it's not enough. It's not enough. So how do we do it? How do we do it? Not only do we use our narrative powerfully and correctly and without any apologies, but we use the tools that are afforded to us so long as we are not in Palestine. And the tools that are afforded to us here in this country are several. First and foremost, boycott. Boycott has become such a powerful weapon that the Israeli government itself considers us to be equivalent to the resistance. I have to say this. The Israeli government considers there's two networks. There's the resistance network that they define as Hamas and Hezbollah. And there's another network that they define as the delegitimization network. Because boycott means we are delegitimizing Israel as a normal state. We are boycotting it because it's not normal to be an apartheid, settler, colonialist, racist state. We will not have normal relations with them, so we're delegitimizing them. The Israeli government considers the boycott movement to be of the same strength as Hamas and Hezbollah. And I thank them for that compliment. So they consider us to be a powerful force. Others consider us to be a powerful force. The Economist recently stated that the boycott movement has become so strong. They specifically said in The Economist, BDS has begun to grab the attention of some of the world's largest financial institutions. You have banks that are pulling out of Israel because of us. Banks that are pulling out of Israel. You have SodaStream that for several consecutive months has not been able to have one profit increase, and they're blaming it on inventory. No, it's because of us. There's so many examples I can give you of economic boycott showing its strength. Numerous examples that I can go into in the Q&A, but that's one aspect. Just recently, trade unions in Ireland are calling for the boycott of Israeli goods. Ireland's largest grocery store has withdrawn Israeli products from them. The largest British trade union has recently came out and asked for BDS. Turkish unions are asking for the same. The National Union of Students in the United Kingdom, which represents more than 600 student unions, passed a resolution recently for the boycott of companies that support Israel. This is huge, and this is just in 1 week. Just in 1 week. And I can tell you more. That's the economic boycott, but we don't stop there, because everything is political, and there's this other myth that the personal is separate from the political, but the personal by God is political. So we have a cultural boycott. That means performers that choose to perform in Israel are not welcome, and we give them a hard time. And we support performers such as Roger Waters, Pink Floyd, who wrote the only song of Pink Floyd that I actually remember, which is The Wall. That's the only song of Pink Floyd that I remember. Okay. He is one of the largest ambassadors for a cultural boycott. We have had an increase of celebrities during this latest onslaught that have come out very strongly in support of Palestinians. Some of them are surprising. I mean, Selena Gomez is surprising for her to come out. Mark Ruffalo has come out. John Cusack has come out. Numerous celebrities who previously had not spoken about Palestine have come out and said what the Israelis are doing is wrong. Okay, we build on that. We increase the celebrity portfolio that's asking for a cultural boycott. That means we not only pressure those who go to perform there, but we pressure any Israeli dance troupe, singer, etc. that wants to perform here because they are ambassadors of the state of Israel. And we say, no, you're not welcome here. We're not going to welcome your dances, your teams, your athletes, nothing. It's a full cultural boycott. That is what's needed. And then we have an academic boycott. And here is where some people start to feel really sensitive, because we believe in something called academic freedom. And as a professor, I believe in it too. And it's because I believe in academic freedom that I call for an academic boycott. Because as we know in this country, freedom is only a privilege when it's not extended to everyone. We don't have academic freedom in Israel. Not only is it denied to Palestinians, it's denied to those courageous Israelis that speak out against the Israeli military. So in the name of academic freedom, we ask for an academic boycott of Israeli institutions. And we ask for an academic boycott of Israeli institutions because you have Israeli institutions that support the Israeli military. And they support them so strongly that the Tel Aviv University recently said, students that serve in the Israeli offensive forces, there's nothing defensive about the terror state. Students that serve in the Israeli offensive forces get 1 year of free tuition. So they're simply saying they're part and parcel of the military-industrial complex in Israel. Fantastic. We will boycott them too. So we're asking for economic, cultural, academic boycott. Full. And we are supported by a small group of courageous Israelis called Boycott from Within, particularly led by a man that I would be proud to call a comrade, Israeli historian Ilan Pappé. who, in contrast to Israeli historian Benny Morris, both of whom recognized that every Israeli village and city was built on our villages and our cities, Benny Morris justifies ethnic cleansing and genocide, and Benny Morris called for ethnic cleansing against the Palestinians in Gaza. Ilan Pappé doesn't. Ilan Pappé recognizes that Israel needs help to break its apartheid and to end its discrimination. And that's why he calls for a full boycott against the state of Israel. And we need to recognize this. It wasn't the economic boycott that broke political apartheid in South Africa. It was the isolation and the shame that was given to the political apartheid in South Africa that broke it, along with, and I will say this, the armed resistance in South Africa. Nelson Mandela was not always a freedom fighter in the eyes of the US government. He was a terrorist. So when they call us terrorists, I don't mind, put me in the same bag with Nelson Mandela. That is fine. We also ask for sanctions again, an arms embargo, and again here we need to realize who our friends are. And very clearly, Latin Americans are our friends. El Salvador, Chile, Peru, Brazil, Ecuador. All recall their ambassadors. Brazil, Argentina, Venezuela, Uruguay, Paraguay suspended free trade agreement talks with Israel. And then you have this small, tiny island of the Maldives that proved to be the most courageous of all countries by actually canceling previously agreed upon bilateral trade agreements with Israel and saying no. There is strength in small sizes. So we work on that. And while we're working on that, we also pay attention to our activists and our comrades here in the United States, because we are denied academic freedom in this country. And we cannot be calling for academic freedom there through academic boycott and not support professors here that are getting fired because they are speaking in the name of justice. You have one professor who just lost his job yesterday, Dr. Stephen Salata, a Palestinian who lost his job because he was tweeting in opposition to the slaughter of our children, and he was justifiably and rightfully saying that Zionism is what is increasing anti-Semitism. And he lost his job. And it becomes incumbent upon us to put pressure on the University of Illinois to reinstate him. And I would urge you to do that, and I'll give you the phone number and the emails and the Q&A for you to be calling the chancellor, emailing the chancellor, and letting them know. And we do have the power to do this, because all too often we think that we're small, but I'll give you one small example of how strong we can be once we believe in our strength. NBC, again, not freedom, not free speech, not democracy now. NBC had this great reporter in Gaza by the name of Ayman Mu'ayyid. He was one of the witnesses to the massacre of 4 boys, deliberate targeting of those boys by missiles. And he wrote about it and spoke about it so eloquently that NBC decided to move him out of Gaza and replace him with Richard Engels. It took 2 days for them to bring him back. Why? Because we protested. Didn't take much. We didn't close anything down. We just called and wrote and called and wrote. And I actually was quite surprised that we were that strong. So that means people can be moved. We can give him back his job. And we need to be doing that. We need to be looking out for our comrades. We need to be doing that all the time. And we need to be connecting the struggles. Here in North Carolina, elsewhere in the United States, we need to be connecting the struggles. So if we are in solidarity with Palestinians because we are opposed to the eradication of the human rights of Palestinians, because of the dehumanization that we have been taught by Hollywood, which is part and parcel of the military-industrial complex, by the way, part and parcel of it, because of the media, because of the generation in this country that we have been taught that people of color need to accept what are given to them, and European Americans, otherwise known as white Americans, need to stop apologizing for their privileges. No. We connect the struggles. That means what is happening to Palestinian Americans, to Palestinians specifically, is very, very similar to what has been happening to African Americans in this country. We need to connect the struggles. And it is in the name of solidarity with Palestinians that I stand here and I oppose the privatization of the prison industrial complex in this country, because it is a theft of African American men, just as the occupation is a theft of our men. So we change the narrative. We speak of liberty, we speak of equality, we speak it with pride, we speak it without apology, and we speak it getting our strength from the Palestinian resilience in Gaza, in West Bank, throughout the land of Palestine, the most resilient. Thank you.